Cyntoia Brown-Long's case drew national attention for the circumstances of her crime. She now has a new book out about her experiences. Brown-Long was sentenced to life in prison when she was 16 years old. According to her lawyers, she was being trafficked when she shot and killed a man who hired her for sex. My colleague Vlad Duthiers sat down with Brown-Long. We pick up their conversation with how she did not come to see herself as a victim of childhood abuse until she was an adult.
Would you say that you've always been a fighter?
I would say that. Not always in a positive way.
Right. Well, so then that sort of leads to my next question, which is, when did you come to realize that the circumstances that you found yourself in, that you were in fact a victim? Mm-hmm. When did that realization come to you?
You know, that actually took many, many years. I was in my late 20s when I actually realized that I was a trafficking victim. For so long, you know, I had thought, they said that I was a teenage prostitute. I knew what I was doing. You know, of course, like, I let them manipulate me into doing this. I thought I was doing something for someone I figured was my boyfriend, and that wasn't necessarily the truth, but it's not like, you know, he was like, you're going to do this or I'm going to kill you. I mean, he made some threats, but I really, you know, dealt with that blaming myself. Like, no, I did that. And it was in slavery, a group in Tennessee who works with human trafficking victims. They work with the government on different operations to combat trafficking. They ran a campaign called What is 13? And in that campaign, they stressed that there's no such thing as a teenage prostitute.
When you heard that, what'd you think?
I was like, well, yeah, there is. You know?
Because you thought to yourself, I was one.
Right. And the more I started to look into it, the more I started to research. And that was when I was like, okay, well, you know, what happened to me is not okay. Like, something actually happened to me. And I just wanted to find out why. Why was I so vulnerable? You know, there's a certain element where you're just vulnerable because you're young, because you're a child. Your minds are just naturally impressionable in that way. But it was like, why was it just so easy for this man to come along, and in the space of a few weeks, I was doing these things. And it was a process, you know. I had dealt with a lot of the trauma from, you know, the violence that was done to me and everything, but that part of it, that shame, that blaming myself, I hadn't dealt with until I was almost 30.
Yeah, no, but like you were an adult when you came to realize that you were a victim of sex trafficking.
I was an adult when I realized that I was a victim of trafficking.
There's a moment in your book where you describe this character that was close to your family, a character named Big John, and you describe the moment that he looked at you when you were still just a child, and you had started to fill out, and you say that you could feel shame, and you could hear your mom looking at you and getting worried about older men checking you out.
Right.
Describe that for me.
So, you know, my mom, like, back in the day, like, Lifetime stayed on the television. There was all these movies, you know. I think, what was the one? It was like the coach was molesting the gymnast. And
sounds like a Lifetime movie.
Right. And she would have me sit with her and watch these movies, and then, like, during the commercials, she'd question me and, like, make sure I understood that these things weren't okay. And, you know, so I knew, like, if someone ever approached me in that way, that I was supposed to sound the alarm. And so whenever he made me feel that way, you know, that's what I did. And I didn't necessarily get the response that I had expected from the people that I was with. My mother was upset, but she wasn't with me at that time. So it just kind of was like, well, that's not how that happened in the movie.
Right.
So,
and did you begin to feel, as almost all of your interactions, specifically with adult men, with older men, had to do with them wanting something from you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that was part of the understanding that, no, it wasn't, like, this wasn't two consensual adults. Like, I was a child. I was 14, 15, 16 years old, and these men were 30, 30 some odd years, 28 years old. Like, they knew what they were doing. And it wasn't a consensual relationship, period.
You mentioned some of those incidences where you had been tossed aside, where you had been forgotten. If you could just go back and share with those individuals what you knew was in your heart, what you knew was in your soul, that you weren't this person that everyone has painted as somebody who's a murderer or somebody who's a robber or somebody who's a prostitute, that you were the person that you are right now.
Yeah.
What would you tell them?
I mean, I would just tell them, what you meant for bad, God turned it around for my good. And I would just hope that you would consider that when you're dealing with other people.
And so what's the message for people that find themselves or that are in the situation that you're in right now? What do you want them to know if they're watching this or if they're coming into contact with you?
I want you to know that, there are people who see you, who hear you. You do have a voice. Even though there are people, there is a system that's trying to tell you that you don't have a voice, that you don't matter. There are people in society that tell you that you're not worth anything, that you're less than, or that your life means any less than theirs or someone else's. They can't place value on your life. They can't assign that to you. God loves you for who you are, how you are. And if you live for Him, then you'll never go wrong.
Can the system be reformed?
I think it can. I think it can. And I think that, it's going to take everyone. I think everyone has to understand that it affects every single person, whether you want to admit it or not. The justice system affects everyone in some way. Everybody is just one bad decision, one mistake, one accident from being caught up in the justice system. And so we all should be invested in making sure that it's treating people the way they should be treated, the way that you would want to be treated.
You can watch the full half-hour interview on our website. Just go to cbsnews.com/Cyntoia.